Good morning. My name is Peter Wooding and welcome to Automotive EV. I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Richard Hankinson from Unipart Group, who is going to present on building sustainable EVs in the supply chain. Looking forward to this session and the information we get from it. So I welcome you to take the stage, so to speak. Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're seeing my slides now. So I say good morning, of course. In a virtual conference, it could be good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the world. So my name is Richard Hankinson. I'm Automotive Director at Unipart Logistics, and I've worked in the industry for over 30 years. And as you can see from the picture on the screen, it's the Lotus Evija electric hypercar. The industry has come a huge way in that time. And without stating the blindingly obvious, this year has seen turmoil and challenge like never before. So on top of the uncertainty that the industry's been facing with Brexit and softening global markets, looming trade wars, and the transformative but disruptive technologies of autonomous, connected and electric, we of course have had a global pandemic to cope with. And for an industry that operates its supply chains on primarily a just-in-time basis, the impact of COVID has been swift, sharp, and frankly shocking. But out of adversity comes opportunity, and out of this chaos, the rise of EV is relentless. In fact, it's a revolution. In fact, this time last year at this very conference, I talked about how the EV revolution was coming, but it's not. Right now. And if anybody needs any evidence for that and is still in doubt, earlier this year in the middle of COVID, there were 3 EV cars in the top 10 sales charts in the UK, which is just phenomenal. Normally they wouldn't get a look into the top 10. And yes, there were many reasons for this, but it does show the potential going forward if the industry has the right support. And as the German government has done, we need the UK government to step up now with more backing of the industry, with incentives to continue this momentum. And it is a real momentum. Back in 2013, there were just 5,000 passenger EV cars on the UK roads. Range was a concern, the cars were relatively expensive, and the technology was in its infancy. Today, great strides have been made with the range. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, the Lucid Air EV passenger car was announced with a range of over 500 miles. And infrastructure is becoming widespread and the costs of access are coming down dramatically. So by mid this year, there were over 300,000 EVs on UK roads. And we're now seeing range, infrastructure and value all hitting the point that the consumers are now considering EVs as a genuine alternative to ICE. And they certainly have choice. There are now over 140 EV variants available in the UK, with nearly 200 more coming in the next 3 years. So it is a phenomenal pace. But is it, despite that, quick enough? Are we moving quickly enough? In 2019, there were around 38,000 EV sales in the UK, representing just 1.6% of the market. And at the start of this year, Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary, said, I want 2020 to be the year electric cars go mainstream. And he said, I want to double our efforts to make owning an electric vehicle the new normal. Well, okay, credit where credit's due. He pioneered a phrase that was going to be in widespread use a couple of short months later, albeit for very different reasons. But seriously, and clearly, there is a lot more to do. By some estimates, we will need to get to 600,000 EV sales a year to hit the UK's CO2 targets. And to achieve this will take more than fine words. The pandemic has seen total vehicle miles plummet. This resulted in cleaner air, fewer traffic jams, and I know it's starting to come back now. But indeed, the carbon footprint of this very conference is a mere fraction of what it had been had it been staged as planned in Munich earlier this year. All great news for the environment, but the point is that this has not gone unnoticed by the public. However, as I say, this race to EV is simply staggering, but it comes with a simply staggering problem. Looking globally, there were 2 million EV sales last year, and it's forecast that it will rise to 10 by 2025, 28 million by 2030, and 56 million by 2040. And this race is essential. Volkswagen Group, by their own admission, is responsible for 2% of the world's CO2 emissions. Now that is simply staggering. And to put it in context, the entire country of Germany is responsible for just 2.2%. But it does mean that we have to build this sustainably. And that means the end of the life cycle. So by 2040, it is forecast that there will be over 500 million EVs on the road. And if we do nothing about this end of life cycle, that's a hell of a lot of landfill. We need to ensure that this switch is sustainable. In short, we must set our sat-navs to destination zero. And how do we go about that? And what is destination zero? Well, it's carbon neutrality and it's zero landfill. And how do we get there? Well, of course, technology is one, and we can come up with new battery technology. And of course, that is being actively worked on. And you will have heard a lot through this conference this week about some of the innovations and technologies that are not too far away. But today we have to deal with the dominant technology in 811. That's 80% nickel, 10% cobalt, and 10% manganese. And these only exist in finite quantities. So how do we tackle this challenge? Well, ideally, you would actually focus on repair. If you can refurbish the battery and put it back into use, that's great. But if you can't, try and reuse them, and if all else fails, recycle. But none of these are simple undertakings, and all will need to be performed centrally by specialists, at least for the foreseeable future, which means you have to get the batteries back. And let's not forget here that batteries are hazardous. They require specialist packaging, and that's when they're new. If shipping new aftermarket batteries around to dealers around the world isn't challenging enough, the return journey is far more difficult. They can be damaged or faulty, and an engineer must inspect the product to pass it fit for transport. And then your packaging requirements rise dramatically. Explosive and fireproof containers, for example. The compliance around all of this and used batteries is extremely complex. But let's have a look at these three options in a little bit more detail. So today, batteries are typically sealed units, and that is starting to change, and we're starting to see lid-off repairs. But EV batteries are dangerous beasts, having up to 11,000 individual cells. And in reality, for the foreseeable future, the most dealers are going to manage in terms of a repair on a battery is to change the main fuse. So designing for repair is critical. While the industry has a long way to go on this, there are steps being taken. And if you design smart sensors in, you can assess cell condition to detect faults early. And we all know what unintended thermal events can do to consumer confidence. So detecting a fault early is critical. And even Unipart are involved in this area with one of our manufacturing companies, Instrumentel, producing some highly advanced sensor technologies which will manage and monitor batteries better through their life cycle. But if you can't repair, maybe a second option is repurposing or reusing, and it is gaining more attention. If you have solar panels, any excess electricity generated on those rare sunny days in the UK, you can sell that electricity to the grid. Except the scheme to be paid for that closed in April last year. So actually now you're giving it away free. So hence an option to store any excess electricity you generate and use it yourself is looking rather more attractive. While Tesla's Powerwall is probably the best known, but there are many other companies now offering their own solutions. And by the way, what do I mean by used batteries? Well, we all know that lithium-ion batteries deteriorate over time, your own laptop and your mobile phone, for instance. And EV batteries are no different. And while they seem to be faring better than first feared, the general consensus put the threshold of usability in vehicles at about 75% capacity. So once it falls to that level, they're no longer useful or viable in a vehicle, but they are still perfectly suited to home storage. Yeah, not everybody's convinced, and yes, EV batteries are over-engineered for home storage use, but it has to be a simpler and a whole lot easier and cheaper option than the third option, which is recycling. However, it is absolutely vital to closing this loop. We are frantically digging rare earth materials out of the ground for battery manufacture, and it is essential that we reclaim and redirect these materials back into the manufacture of EV batteries. Earlier in the week, Professor Dave Greenwood from Warwick covered just the sheer range of raw materials that go into the manufacture of a battery, and it is simply incredible to see the materials that make up a battery. And for that very reason, it really isn't a simple process to do the recycling. And if you want to get really technical, it's got pyro and both pyro and hydrometallurgy processes needed. And this industry is very much in its infancy, with just a few specialists at the moment who offer this and in limited volumes, and it isn't cheap. But the industry is moving very rapidly in this area, and let's remind ourselves of that challenge: at 500 million vehicles in the global park by 2040. So we need smart solutions, and that is exactly what we here at Unipart are doing right across the supply chain. At the very front end in manufacturing, we have full EV battery manufacture with Hyperbat, which is a joint venture with our partnership with Williams Advanced Engineering, and as I've mentioned, Instrumentel, creating highly advanced sensors. And then in the logistics space, my area, we of course manage compliance, packaging, transport, and smart storage. And on that front, we're proud to lead Project Detain, a research initiative backed by Unite UK, to develop a smart facility to store batteries that can detect and contain thermal runaway incidents. But these are predominantly forward-facing services, the front end of that life cycle. And so we must all solve the far end of the life cycle. Frankly, let's be honest, the messy end. As I've said, moving a used or damaged battery is a whole different ballgame to handling new. And the first step is diagnostics. And ideally, you would do that at the dealership or even the roadside. And we're piloting exactly that today with a major premium brand, which allows us to determine the most appropriate mode of transport to bring these batteries back, and whether full containment is going to be necessary. And ultimately, whether what the destination of the battery is going to be, whether it goes to repair, repurpose, or does it head for recycling. So what we cannot sustain is that these valuable, and that's both economically and environmentally valuable, batteries are going into landfill. As again, Dave Greenwood reminded us earlier in the week, a battery can form up to 50% of the value of a new electric vehicle. So we must ensure that EV doesn't solve one problem, but create a whole raft of others. This is where we at Unipart are focusing our efforts, and in short, it's to ensure that the EV revolution has a sustainable future and achieves destination zero. If you want help in this, we can help you navigate the complexities, and please do talk to us. Contact details for myself and Luke, my head of BD, are on the screen, and of course available through the portal. So we've spoken with many people this week, and it's been great to see that. So on that front, thank you for your time, but I must also say a big thank you to Peter, Sean, and the 360 team for organising such a great and informative event this week. Thank you. So I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions, but at this point, I'll hand you back to Peter.
Thank you, Richard. Absolutely fantastic presentation and thought-provoking. Do you have any chance or any opportunity to speak more about Project Detain?
Project Detain.
Detain.
Yes, it was a Innovate UK funded project which we led, and it's essentially trying to build not just what would you need to store batteries safely, and I think we've all seen events with the finished product of the odd electric vehicle catching fire, and once these things go, they go. But we've also seen events in the manufacture of batteries, not with us, I hasten to add, but they have happened around the world. So it is essential that these things, which do have intrinsic danger just through the chemistry with them, that they are stored safely. So we've looked at everything from the temperature control of how you store batteries, but particularly how you would then detect and contain any thermal event rather than you losing the entire store. So this is the solution is a dedicated battery store as opposed to something that you store within a main warehouse and risk essentially losing other product as well. But it's about that that detection and containment, and it's something that batteries are in relatively low volume today, relatively, but 500 million vehicles on the road by 2040. The storage of these is going to become a major thing. So we're at the forefront of that, and we are proud to have led that research with Innovate UK.
Thank you, because I'd also actually found out this week that on finished vehicle distribution of electric vehicles, the underside of the vehicle is now quality checked through its process.
Indeed, and there have been instances of vehicles damaging the underside as they are put onto ro-ro ferries to the ships to take these distribute the vehicles around the world. And the last thing you want is to be putting a damaged battery onto a ship about to sail around the world with another 5,000 potentially EV vehicles as well. So that check is essential at production stage, but it's also essential through the distribution of those vehicles as well.
I think with the camera systems now that they're using, where historically it's been for body damage, etc., that it actually does that automatically now as they drive through, which is quite staggering. And if detected, I suppose it then goes into quarantine or isolation, as a useful word at the moment. Yeah.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, probably around 14 days is about it, actually.
Yeah, probably right. Yeah. So really, really good to talk to you again. Thanks very much. We could actually carry on and have a few more things I'd like to ask, but as we're running into sort of a countdown for the next session, really appreciate your support for the event. As always, you're a great headline sponsor and have contributed across the board with a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight, and a lot of opportunity for people to learn this week, as well as hopefully enjoy the banter, as they used to say at an in-person event. Take care, Richard.
It's been great, and I defy anybody to say that they haven't learned anything this week. It's been really good to see all of the different perspectives across what is just a huge and complex industry.
Thank you. Keep safe.
Peter. Thanks, team.
Soon. Bye.